People are often buried alive in movies so frequently that you involuntarily start to think that it never happens in real life. Unfortunately, such things do occur, and the best confirmation of that is a story that took place 10 years ago in Huddersfield, United Kingdom. When Michelina met Marcin, it was love at first sight. But after their feelings faded, Michelina decided that it was time for her to start a new life in another country. However, Marcin would sooner kill her than allow it. Not everyone separates like civilized adults. There are those in the world who believe they can simply bury all their problems. Quite literally in this case. 21-year-old Michelina Lewandowska and 19-year-old Marcin Kospaczek met in their native Poland in 2005. A year later, Marcin proposed to Michelina, and they moved to the United Kingdom to start a life together in a new country. However, when Michelina learned she was pregnant in 2008, their relationship began to decline. They called off their engagement but continued to live together as a couple in Marcin's parents' house. Even after the engagement was broken off, Michelina continued to wear her engagement ring because she still loved Marcin and hoped they could work through their problems. Unfortunately, that was not meant to be. By 2011, it became evident that Marcin was not interested in reconciling with Michelina. He tried to avoid her and spent almost all his free time at the gym, training 5 times a week. But unexpectedly, on Saturday, May 28, 2011, Marcin invited Michelina to go shopping with him and his friend, 18-year-old Patrick Boris. Michelina was surprised since Marcin rarely expressed a desire to spend time with her. Nevertheless, she was glad and thought that maybe things would improve now. The girl hurried to the bathroom to do her makeup. Fortunately, on that day, their 3-year-old son Jakob was with his grandmother, Marcin's mother, and didn't witness what happened next. When Michelina emerged from the bathroom, she saw Marcin and Patrick staring at her intently, their lips twisted into a horrifying grin. Marcin grabbed Michelina's hand and said, "I want to show you something." He then pulled out a 300,000-volt stun gun from his pocket, pressed it against her neck, and activated it. As Michelina fell to the floor, she felt the pain coursing through her entire body. Marcin, weighing 101 kilograms as a bodybuilder, knelt on her chest, restraining her on the ground, watching her convulse from the electric shock. Coming to her senses momentarily, Michelina asked Marcin if he intended to kill her, and he assured her that she had nothing to fear because he would just take her somewhere. He then ordered Patrick to fetch some packing tape. The men gagged Michelina, and bound her mouth with tape, and then tied her ankles and wrists. Before leaving her bound and terrified, they subjected her to another round of electric shocks. If at first she thought it was some cruel joke, now she had no doubts about their intentions. She couldn't move and feared losing consciousness, unsure if she would ever wake up again. Several hours later, Marcin and Patrick dragged Michelina into the kitchen and stuffed her into a cardboard box. At some point, they mentioned a plastic bag. She thought they would put it over her head to suffocate her. But instead, Marcin began sealing the box with packing tape. The girl lost what little composure she had left and struggled to scream. Marcin then knelt down, laughed, and said, "I've hated you for 4 years. You will never see your son again." The most chilling aspect of this scene was not the words filled with hatred he uttered but the eerie calmness on his face. After sealing the cardboard box, the men grabbed it from both sides, carried it to Patrick's car, and placed it in the trunk. The girl could sense that they traveled a distance before Marcin and Patrick removed the box. The men dragged Michelina along the ground, and she felt the pain from the stones scratching her back. Inside the box, she couldn't see that Marcin and Patrick had brought her to a wooded area near Huddersfield. They placed the box with Michelina inside into a shallow grave they had dug in advance and began burying it. While lying in the box, terrified and still feeling intense pain, Michaela could hear the men throwing dirt onto her grave. It was dark and incredibly cramped inside the box. Michelina was convinced she would suffocate, so she started breathing as shallowly as possible, trying not to lose consciousness. She strained her hearing, attempting to discern if the car had driven away so she could begin to escape. She no longer doubted that if they were still nearby when she attempted to get out, Marcin would strike her with a shovel. Michelina couldn't hear the sound of a departing vehicle, but after some time, she decided it was time to act, regardless of whether they were nearby or not. Thousands of thoughts raced through her head, but she tried to remain calm. Later she would confess that thoughts of her young son, Jakub, kept her going. If she died, she would never see him again, and he would be left without a mother. She couldn't allow that to happen. Casting a glance at her bound wrists, Michelina suddenly realized she had something that could help her escape, her diamond engagement ring. Using the sharp edges of the ring, Michelina managed to cut through the tape that bound her hands, feet, and mouth. Then she began scratching at the cardboard of the box. She noticed that the cardboard was slightly damp, possibly from the moist soil piled on top of it, and after a while, she succeeded in creating a small hole. Michelina extended her fingers through the opening and tore at the box. However, all she felt was soil, the same earth that her boyfriend and his friend had thrown on her grave. At that moment, she still didn't know that in addition to the meter-deep layer of soil they buried her under, they had placed a 40-kilogram log on top to ensure she couldn't escape. More and more soil seeped inside the box, covering her face, hair, and clothes. Michelina screamed and called for help, but there was no one around to hear her cries. She grew tired, and her body trembled with pain. But she knew that if she wanted to see her son again, it was crucial to keep moving forward. She repeated to herself, "Don't give up, just don't give up." Michelina continued to pound, push, and tear at the cardboard box until she was able to extend her entire hand out and then lift her head above the ground. She eagerly took a breath of fresh air. It was dark, but she could see the trees, leaves, and the sky above her head. Michelina was covered in soil from head to toe, and she had no strength left, but she no longer doubted that she would succeed in escaping. Making one final effort, she managed to lift herself up and finally claw her way out from beneath the earth. After an hour spent in the box, Michelina miraculously freed herself from her grave. Not only did she survive, but she used the very item given to her by her would-be killer, the diamond engagement ring, to save herself. Michelina ran out of the woods toward the road and flagged down a passing car. She was incredibly lucky that the driver didn't flee in terror upon seeing a dirt-covered, weakened woman emerge onto the road. He stopped to find out what had happened and, after listening to her, called the police. 15 minutes later, the police arrived at the crime scene, and Michelina showed them the cardboard box in which she had been left to endure her final moments in horrific agony. There is no doubt that Marcin had never been as terrified in his entire life as when the police knocked on his door and informed him that he was being arrested for kidnapping and attempted murder. He resisted for a long time and tried to claim that he only intended to scare Michelina, not to kill her. However, this defense didn't help him much because no one believed it. It didn't take the police long to discover that after leaving Michelina to die, the men used her bank card to withdraw £500 from an ATM, then went home and started playing video games. In reality, Marcin had no intention of going back for Michelina. His plan was something entirely different. A hardcore bodybuilder, 25-year-old Marcin had developed a dependency on anabolic steroids, which made him prone to fits of rage. When he heard rumors that Michelina no longer wanted to fight for their relationship and planned to return to Poland, taking Jakub with her, he decided that it would be better for his son to grow up without a mother at all. He had no doubt that his own mother would raise his grandson better than Michelina. Intending to eliminate his former fiancée, he devised one of the most horrifying deaths imaginable for her. In January 2012, Marcin was found guilty of attempted murder and kidnapping and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Patrick was not found guilty of attempted murder but was found guilty of kidnapping. He was sentenced to 4.5 years in a juvenile correctional facility. Both men were required to serve half of their sentences before being eligible for parole. However, Marcin will not be released anytime soon. After his arrest, the police searched his parents' house, where he lived with Michaela and their son. The police found various chemicals and instructions for making explosives at the house. As a result, while Marcin was already serving his sentence for attempted murder, he was sentenced to an additional 8 4-year terms related to the explosives. He wished for my death and planned to kill me in the most horrifying way imaginable, but I didn't allow him to succeed. Using the last shreds of my strength, I fought my way out of that grave. Now it is he who is imprisoned, Michaela said after the guilty verdict was delivered. Michaela was relieved to hear about the 20-year sentence for her former lover, but she still lives in fear, even though she and her son have moved to another house far away from Huddersfield, and their address is kept confidential for their safety. After the trial, Michaela admitted that she still experiences nightmares about what she went through. While I was trapped inside that shallow grave, buried alive, I feared that my life was over and that I would die. I prayed to God to help me survive and take care of my little son. The thought of my son gave me the strength to break free from that box and escape. For many years, I loved Marcin Kaska deeply. But after the horrific attack on me, my feelings for him turned into hatred. I still suffer from nightmares that Marcin might come back, find me, and kill me. I hope he realizes that what he did to me was wrong. I hope no one else will ever have to endure the trials I went through that day at the hands of a man I loved and trusted.